Hello, everybody. I watched a very surprising program on Gbnews today. It was the great debate and about the parties stopping net zero. But on the panel with Nana, and I know Nana's views, but on the panel with Nana, there were three people, all of whom actually had met, and Jim Dale was included. But every single member of that panel supported net zero. The only thing was Jim Dale wanted it yesterday. The Liberal Democrat ex-minister wanted it faster, and the UKIP representative wanted it, but just slower. So all supported net zero. That wasn't much of a debate. I'm going to play it and just give you a few comments as I go along. This won't take long.
I'm asking, would ditching net zero get your vote? Energy Secretary Claire Coutinho has claimed that Labour's mission to hit net zero carbon emissions in Britain's energy supply by 2030 is unrealistic and risks plunging the country into darkness. She talks of blackouts. Technologies are in different development to capture the surplus energy generated through renewables, such as wind turbines and solar panels. But Ms Coutinho says that such tech isn't ready, and without it, Labour risks unleashing wide public unrest. So Keir Starmer has pledged to fast-track wind and solar power projects in order to reduce the country's reliance on fossil fuels within 6 years, whereas the Tories are aiming for 11 years. But is the timeframe irrelevant? And would we, as a country, should we even be pursuing net zero at all? So for the Great British Debate this I'm asking, would ditching net zero get your vote? Well, joining me now, former Home Office Minister Norman Baker, Jim Dale, Senior Meteorologist from the British Weather Services, and Henry Bolton, border security expert. Right, I'm going to start with you, Jim Dale. Ditching net zero, is it time to do it?
Is it time to do it? It's past the time to do it, to be honest with you.
Ditching it.
I'll tell you what's happening here. The Tories, Coutinho, she's basically chasing not to be last place. In other words, between Reform and themselves in terms of who's going to come up with the most stupidest policy. And they're going in that direction, just as they did at the local council elections and the mayoral elections. And look what happened there. It was a big test in London, and it fell apart for the Tories, particularly with ULEZ. But climate change was a big issue. It's still a big issue. It's not before time that we're talking about it. I'm really glad that we are talking about it. Much more needs to be done, even by the Labour Party, who are probably at the front of this in terms of moving in that direction. I hope they move faster. I've got my own 6-point manifesto, which I won't mention here, but nonetheless, I'll try and push whoever wins this general election in that direction. And it's good to be talking about it anyway.
Well, regular viewers know that I think that's a pile of garbage. He went into politics there instead of, the question was, will stopping net zero gain votes, actually? But in actual fact, he's totally bonkers. He has no knowledge of what climate is even. He doesn't really understand even what climate is. But I'll carry on.
Yeah, but what Claire is pointing out is that, we'll have blackouts because a lot of the energy generated in this renewable form we're not able to capture it yet. So, for example, one of the things collecting the electricity from the wind farms, a lot of it is wasted. We would need to build hundreds of miles of pylons, which we don't have, and we're unlikely to have that by 2030. Jim?
Yeah, well, look, I've always said on your programme, Nana, this is an evolution, not a revolution. And by the way, renewables, if you look at the way that they're moving in terms of the direction of travel, they're replacing coal, which is virtually non-existent now as a power source in the UK. Very often, certainly in the last 3 or 4 months, it's been the renewables have been top, and the other things have been, and that's that is the direction of travel. So this is just sounding off by.
No,
but
she's saying that the time span, but they are both going in the same direction. Her point is that the time span would mean that we'd have blackouts because we are not ready.
Spot on there, of course. There's no means of storing the energy. For him to claim that renewables kept us going without gas, we'd have been in desperate states. Just look at this graph, of how much gas has to top up wind. Every single megawatt of wind requires a megawatt of gas to back it up. And when we're waiting and wind's coming up, the gas turbines have to be turning, wasting gas. And in fact, a recent report showed that we're now losing billions because the combination of wind and gas, for that amount of electricity we've got, for what wind we've got, what gas we've got, it's cheaper to have only gas. Here's the graph. This graph shows the amount of the costs of running wind and gas powers back up together, and you've got to have a megawatt of gas for every megawatt of wind, because sometimes the wind doesn't blow. That's the only way of backing up wind. Everything else is too slow. You've got to have that gas. So on this graph here, up to this point, we were losing a lot of money each year by having the wind with the gas. And wind alone would have been a disaster, of course, because we'd have up to 9 days or more without any power at all. And this period here is when the Ukraine war came and gas prices shot up. But what's interesting here, and if you read the bottom there, it shows a steady decline in the savings, so that over the period from June 29 to September 21, wind power cost the UK cumulatively 18 billion over gas power. And from October to December 22, it recovered 8 billion, but since then it has declined back to a cumulative loss of 18 billion over the 5-year period. So if we take the last 5 years, we've lost 18 billion by having wind compared to just having gas. Don't ever let them tell you that wind is cheap. It isn't. It's extremely expensive. But even more important is, as we add more wind now, the maximum of wind we can get above the nighttime demand, which is low, has to be paid for. So as we add more and more wind, that what we call constraint payments are going to be paid for more and more and more. We're going to pay more and more wind farms to switch off. It's a complete con.
Eddie, Norman Baker.
We won't have blackouts. That's just an absolute scare story. And the move towards net zero is sensible for 3 reasons. First of all, there is a climate emergency, whether people like it or not. Secondly, it's absolutely sensible to make sure we aren't dependent upon overseas sources from dodgy countries like Russia for our energy. And by getting our own energy generation levels up, we avoid that. And thirdly, actually, renewables will be, and in many cases are already, cheaper per unit, which will help reduce bills.
That's pure ignorance, absolutely pure ignorance. They're not cheaper, they're much more expensive. I've just shown you at the moment, even allowing for the benefit we had for a short time in the Ukraine war, we're running at an £18 billion deficit in the last 5 years. That's 18 billion 5 years. You're looking at 3.5 billion a year or so deficit, because we're using wind, and that's going to grow an awful lot more. The man is just inventing all this to say we won't have blackouts. Well, what happens, and I can show you all the time, even this last month, when we had hardly any wind. So just tell me what happens. In his world, if he defines it as no blackout, I suppose it means non-blackout. We've got ignorant politicians like this, and he is ignorant, making these statements on television and appearing as some sort of knowledgeable person. What total rubbish.
Well, but a lot of them currently now are being subsidised, which is why they're kind of cheaper at the moment.
Well, the subsidy all round, though. Nuclear power is enormous.
But the point that Claire is making is, again, that we do not have the infrastructure in place to reach it by 2030. So she's not saying that we shouldn't head there, but she's saying that basically we haven't got things in place. What do you think, Henry?
Well, I think that she's right. Look, Labour are saying that they're not going to raise taxes. The Conservatives are saying that they will. Look, if you're going to ramp this up, increase the timeline, as Labour are proposing, then you are going to have to spend massive amounts of money to do it. Massive, and resources, which also cost. So it's going to be, I simply don't think it's feasible. And we've got an economy that is already struggling. And GDP's higher, but GDP per capita is not increasing as well. And the reason for that, what that tells us is that ordinary people are struggling. Their cost of living is increasing compared to what their income is. So we've got to be very careful of that. The public can't take much more. And when we've got an economy that is actually creating so little in the way of global emissions, I think that we've got to pace ourselves sensibly, maturely. And, I'm not saying that net zero is not a good mission to pursue.
But is it?
I am saying that we've got to pursue it at a pace that is sensible and does not put undue pressure on the economy and ordinary people, as it is doing already.
Nobody's really questioning the actual premise of net zero. Some people are, and slightly being silenced by it. But why is no one even questioning the premise of it as to whether there may even be other things that we haven't realised maybe affecting the warming of the globe, or whether in fact the Earth will actually warm in any case? And a lot of people are of that point of view. Some people think that global warming is a natural phenomenon and that there's very little that we can do to stop it from happening, and the Earth itself will cool itself and get itself to the right temperatures, some of which we may not be able to exist. But if we are going to put technologies in place, the technologies we're using, if we're planning to do it at an arbitrary date of 2030, we will suffer greatly, Jim Dale. That is the problem, surely.
We have to get there a lot faster even than 2030. If you look out your window, you can see what's going on in Austria yesterday. Cars floating, rich Austria, okay, wealthy Austria, cars floating down the street in huge floods. We've seen it so many times in the last few months and years.
But we're not in Austria, and I looked out my window and it was warm but freezing. And what month are we in? It's May, is it? Yeah. Is it May or June? It's June, isn't it? It's June. It's supposed to be summer.
There are people who live in a padded cell who don't even look beyond that, to be honest with you. Let's make
so what's your point, Jim? Is that where you live?
UK event. It's a global event, not a UK event. And therefore, you've got to look more widespread. You've got to look at what's going on. We've had 12 months of 1.5 degrees C surpassed. That was the IPCC level. They said we don't need to pass that. 12 months in a row, ocean temperatures going in the same direction. I say to you now, watch this summer. You watch the catastrophes going around the globe. And by the way, in terms of the movement of this, I think I pick it up on Henry's point about it's the right direction. I think the Labour Party have more or less got it wrong. I want them to go faster, but they're pulled back a little bit. Now,
you want them to go, hold on. You want them to go faster, but that's not possible because the infrastructure isn't there. And again, I come back to Claire Coutinho's point, is that as much as if you really believe in net zero and you think that is the way forward, then you have to acknowledge that in order to get there, you have to have the infrastructure in place, which it isn't there now. So I'm wondering if Claire is right, that actually we won't be able to harness the energy. If we get rid of our current sources too quickly, that we won't be able to harness the energy. Norman Baker.
Well, look, I mean, we've just had a couple of years of energy shocks, of prices going through the roof, largely because of, for example, the Ukraine war, where we'd be dependent upon imports of gas from dodgy parts of the world, and we're not in control of that. If we get renewables and indeed energy conservation we've talked about up and running, then in fact we deal with that issue. We get more stability, and it will be cheaper.
Well, as it happens, I've just shown you the graph, which had the effect of the high gas prices in the Ukraine war. But since then, we've lost 18 billion by having the wind with the gas. And had we just had gas alone, today be 18 billion better off as a society than having the wind with us. And that's getting worse and worse each year. And we're going to add more wind. The deficit's going to become enormous. So he is totally wrong there. And in fact, a lot of our natural gas is coming from fracking in the USA, where they bring it over to a ship, they have to compress it, use all the fossil fuel energy to compress it, bring it across compressed, get to a place like Milford Haven, importing it, and then expand it and send it through gas pipes, increasing the CO2. I mean, this is madness. But politicians like this, they're into a dogma world. They have no understanding of the actual technology or the actual subject. As regards what Jim Dale's just said, well, I think people know what I think there. This is a man who pretends to be a qualified meteorologist when he's not, and a man who doesn't even understand what climate is. As regards the floods in Austria, anywhere else, they're just floods. And we already know that the IPCC, the Met Office, the Royal Meteorological Society don't accept all those things. I use this data all the time from his alarmist side. They don't support what he's claiming. But then he's just a media sensation, as it were, or something. I don't know. I really almost fed up trying to answer his ridiculous statements.
Prices will come down for people if we invest in renewables and energy conservation. That's the truth of the matter.
Yeah, you would think, but what energy company have you ever known that allows the prices to go down? Henry Bolton, have you ever seen energy prices go down, even if we are owning the source?
No, I haven't.
Exactly.
No. And look, Jim has said this is a global problem, yes. So we need to deal with it globally. What about China? What about India? What about the emerging economies that are the major source of the problem now? That's one thing. The other thing, though, is when we think about our own policy, what's seriously lacking is a national energy strategy. One of the reasons Norman's just talked about the Ukraine-Russia war and indeed and things going on in the Middle East, that raises the price of energy. But also, what about our national storage capacity? We didn't have anything like, when that war hit in Ukraine, we had nothing like the storage capacity that other countries have, and that then made sure that we suffered a shock rather than being able to cushion the economy accordingly.
A lot of that was correct in the sense that we did away with our gas storage capacity. We actually destroyed it. It's under the North Sea. It's a huge reservoir, and we're actually trying to pay people to get it back. But we destroyed it. Other people didn't. No, they closed it, but they didn't destroy it. But the Conservative Party, I think it was, never mind, it was the Conservative Party, they closed it and destroyed it. This is madness. These people, all three of these people, haven't got a clue what they're talking about, actually. But Bolton there is actually nearer to it than the others. Of course, whatever happens and what we do makes no difference at all anyway. But Bolton's nearer to the truth. But he shouldn't be accepting net zero. He doesn't know what he's talking about on that.
Right,
so there's a much broader issue here.
So you think, Henry, you believe that we should pursue net zero, but at a slower or faster pace? Slower or?
Much slower, much slower.
And obviously, Norman, slower or?
As fast as we possibly can.
And Jim Dale?
Yeah, exactly the same. As fast as we can. Let's get there.
As fast as we can.
Stop the catastrophe.
Irrespective of the cost to the consumer or the fact that we may well have blackouts.
There'll be no blackouts, the cost to consumer will go down.
OK. All right, well,
In a very quickly produced video. And the reason is I'm working very hard on preparing for the Isle of Man. I'm going over to the Isle of Man, where I stand at a remote chance, but a chance of trying to stop the net zero madness there, which is exactly the same as elsewhere. The difference is with a population of 85,000, a person like me can have more influence proportionally than with a population of 66 million. And there's going to be quite a lot of publicity on this. And I'll be on radio for a couple of sessions, and one of them is an hour with phone-ins or a debate. And then there's a big talk in the evening, and all this will be reproduced and put on my channel and other channels, so that you can see what in microcosm is the same thing as the UK. It's exactly elsewhere for that matter. But here I'll be able to give a rounded view. And so you'll be able to see what my talks are like when I give them. Although this one will have the general part of it, explaining about CO2, extreme weather and all that. But it'll also be including specific things to the Isle of Man. Because once you get hold of exact data, you can do things, can't you? And I just hope we can have some influence there. Well, at least I know that the head of the Climate Change Committee there is aware of what I'm saying. I know the government there is aware of what I'm saying, and lots of people are. And so I want to use this as the microcosm of an example to roll out elsewhere, as it were. That's why I'm putting so much effort into the Isle of Man. So this is a very quickly produced video, because frankly, I couldn't believe that Gbnews put up a debate which was one-sided, the debate that never was. Okay, thank you.